Welcome to the lABLEd podcast, a show about disability, illness and difference. I'm Lucy.
And I'm Alice.
And that's Lola.
Kaleidoscope identity, and this is who I'm meant to be. I'm just labelled me. I'm just labelled me.
Don't forget, in this episode, I might swear, Lucy might cry, and you can check out details of the trigger warnings on our website. There we go. Has everybody got a recording thingy?
Yeah.
Fab. Okay. So, Carrie Ann, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Carrie Ann Lightley. I am a wheelchair user. I'm a blogger who focuses on accessible travel writer, and I head up the marketing team for the national disability organisation lABLEd, which is how I know Lucy.
Yes, she has to put up with me on a weekly basis.
And whereas our listeners are only going to have to do every other week. So yeah.
Right. So, Carrie Ann, can you tell us a bit about your love of accessible travel and where that started? Was it something that you always knew you wanted to do right from an early age, or is it something that you've grown into over the years?
I think I definitely fell into it, to be honest. It wasn't something I envisaged myself doing. I, up until my late teens, just kind of shunned anything to do with disability from being a young teenager. I'm sure you'll all have been and that you'll hear from future guests again and again. I just wanted to be like my friends, and that didn't include being disabled. And so, yeah, I just cracked on. I went to school, I went to college. I got a job in a HR department of a local supermarket, which meant that I could earn some money as well as do my college course. And then I finished college. I needed a full-time job, and the only accessible job at the supermarket was working on the checkouts, which, it just wasn't for me. It was just, I sat there doing the whole beep, beep, beep thing and just thinking, I need to use my brain. I need something that challenges me. My mum found a job advertised in a local paper for a charity that had an office space where I lived. This was a charity that had holiday centres around the UK for disabled people who had care needs. They needed some support in their admin team. I applied for the job, and the rest is history, really. I had zero experience working for charities, working in travel, or working in disability, but I just kind of winged it. I took myself into the interview and went, well, you haven't got anybody else in your office who's actually disabled.
Use that disability card.
I know how to speak to your customers. So we went from there, really.
Yeah.
That's how it started anyway.
Okay. And have you done a lot of sort of travel yourself and been to a lot of different places?
So I think when people hear that I'm a travel blogger, they think that I spend most of my life on like Caribbean beaches or whatever, which would be wonderful, wouldn't it? I think most of my travel, particularly in relation to the blog, is staycation.
Right.
So UK based. I have been lucky enough to have a couple of sponsored trips abroad through the blog. I've travelled reasonably well abroad, just kind of personally, because that's the thing as well, sometimes I just need to go on a trip and not write about it, actually, and not post the photos to Instagram or whatever, and just have an actual holiday where I'm switched off. But yeah, I have a lot more travel ambition in terms of going to a few more far-flung places than I have done already.
So have you got like a bucket list of? Like,
yeah, I mean, the bucket list trip was supposed to be happening this year.
Oh no.
My best friend emigrated to Perth in Western Australia 6 or 7 years ago. Basically since then we've been planning a trip to go and see her. For one reason or another, it's been delayed a few times. It was actually booked for the end of March this year. We were going to go to Bali, and we were going to finish up in Singapore. It remains the bucket list trip, definitely. We will get there one day, but I think it's going to take quite a bit longer before we do.
Did you get a refund? How did you sort it out in the end?
Yeah, thankfully. We had only booked sort of flights really at the point that flights in an Airbnb, I think, at the point that it had to be cancelled. So I was able to get everything refunded. So that was one stress that we didn't have to worry about, thankfully.
I tell you what, though, when you do get on that holiday, it's going to be absolutely amazing, isn't it?
It is. Well, I haven't seen my friend for it must be almost 3 years now. So we obviously we do FaceTime and stuff like that, but it'll be amazing to catch up and see each other. Yeah,
definitely.
So with your traveling abroad, how easy do you find it, making sure that you're going to find accessible accommodation and that, the places that you're going to are going to be accessible for you? And do you find, are there places that are better than others? I imagine, going to cities generally is probably better than going to, somewhere a bit off the grid. But then I think about places. I've been to Rome, and I mean, that was a nightmare for me. I can't imagine how somebody in a wheelchair would access a city like that.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I've also been to Rome, and I've written a travel guide to Rome for wheelchair users, and it wasn't easy, but I absolutely loved it. It was one of my favourite trips, and I think there is something about separating those two elements as well. Because, when you get into the planning process, it's really easy to just have this narrow view of, right, I can only go to the place that has this level of accessibility and that and the other. And you're not always thinking about what you actually want to get out of a trip or where you actually want to go. And that's always my advice when people say, how do you do your planning process and all the rest of it? My advice is always, of course, you have to think about accessibility because, you have to be able to get there. But don't let that be the overriding motivation for your trip or for the destination that you choose. I actually have a travel planner that people can download from my blog, so they follow my process, basically. It's not perfect because nothing is, but it's how I book a trip, and it will hopefully be helpful to other people. As with everything I do blog-wise, there is always the caveat that I know a lot about my needs as an individual. Everybody's needs are different. And so, I can write and talk about and advise based on my needs, but don't ever think that I'm trying to be some all-encompassing accessibility guru, because it's just impossible, actually.
I have to be often go away for day trips and holidays with a very good friend of, a close friend of the family, and I have to be very, very careful what I say to this close friend of the family. If we're going to Tenerife, for instance, and I'll say, I want to go on a boat trip to see the dolphins. Or I could say something even more ridiculous than that, and then 3 days later I find myself on a boat to see the dolphins. You're going whether you like it or not. And sometimes I've changed my mind. I don't really want to do this. But no, you're going. So being able to have, I think, those people around that go, actually, I would really love to do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And then remember it and go, well, you're doing this now, whether you like it or not, you're doing it because we've organised it.
I agree with that. I think, we do, as disabled people, have a tendency to want to sit within our own kind of self-imposed limitations, and it can be really anxious thinking about doing or trying something that you haven't done before. And there's definitely been things that I've done as part of my travels, sometimes because of the people that I've been with, or sometimes because it's been an organised trip for a blog, where I've done things that I wouldn't normally have felt comfortable with and always really enjoyed them. It's never been oh God, I wish I'd not actually gone and done snorkeling in the Red Sea, or I wish I'd not actually done a wheelchair abseil. I did a wheelchair abseil because I was doing some work with the BBC, and I'm more terrified about talking on a BBC News camera or and in the end, I did the interview after the abseil, so all my nerves had disappeared. I was like, oh, brilliant. Have a camera in front of me, I don't care.
Nothing is terrifying after you've done that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I think, going back to is it easy, or is the planning process easy? It's always difficult. It is always going to be more involved than anybody who doesn't have impairment or disability to think about when planning a trip. And it's always a leap of faith. I've been working in this arena for 15 years. I have heard all of the horror stories. I've been to some amazing places, but sometimes even I get it wrong. Sometimes even I book a trip and I get there and I go, oh, God, the room isn't actually accessible or whatever.
The last holiday that me and my husband went on before the world closed, I had done a load of research and I was really excited because we were going to go hiking. I was really looking forward to it. And I had because again, before the world closed down, I was training for a marathon and doing all sorts. So I was like, hiking, this is going to be awesome. I'm the fittest I've ever been. And I was really looking forward to it. I'd found a guide who would pick us up from our hotel, drive us up there, go up the mountain with us. And it said, this is wheelchair accessible, this is disabled accessible. And so I thought, okay, so it's going to be probably walking up a man-made trail that they've concreted or something, so it's not going to be a hike, but it's going to be the distance and I'm going to get the views, and so that's going to be great. And we got there, and basically we got to a car park at sort of 2/3 of the way up this mountain, and he went, here you go then. And I was like, do we not walk up the mountain?
Oh, no.
And he was like, this is the trail, and he sort of showed it to me, and my husband and I took 2 steps, and I thought, no, I'm going to die. I am going to break my ankle and fall down this mountain. And so we ended up going, and we got our money back and stuff like that. But I had to have a cry about it because I was absolutely really disappointed. I was really upset because I've been really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes you can put that planning in and it just, people's understanding of what accessible means, particularly when you're talking on a global level, it can be different.
100%. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I feel that feeling of that complete disappointment and almost internalizing it and going, oh, I should have done this better. I should have done that better. But do you know what? You've got to give yourself a break. You've got to, regardless of what happens, regardless of whether it turns out how you wanted it to, you're still having a new experience. You're still doing something different.
When I was at school, we went on the annual trip to Paris to go and see all the sites, Disneyland Paris, all that kind of jazz. And the week before we were due to go away, the company who normally take care of everything went bankrupt, so we didn't get to go. We were so disappointed that the teacher said, don't worry, we'll cobble together something, we're still going to go. We got there in the dead of night, so I went to bed, went to sleep, got up in the morning, and I said to the teacher, could you get them to unlock the disabled bathroom, which was at the end of this corridor? And he went, yeah, I'll go and get the key. Went to get the key, and the nice Frenchman, I say nice in the most sarcastic way possible, said, no, it's full of garden furniture. And when he said, can you take the garden furniture out, he went, no. I think it's safe to say that all 3 disabled people on this call have had some sort of travel nightmare at some point in their life.
I think the thing is, I think it's just universal, isn't it? I think nobody ever has a perfect travel experience.
No.
But I think as disabled people, ours are probably heightened. The disappointments are probably heightened. The potential for things to go wrong is probably a bit higher. But what I don't want is for people to go, oh, well, I'm just never going to travel because my wheelchair might get broken on the plane, or I will have to pay a lot of money for insurance, or what if I get there and the room isn't actually accessible? And do you know what? All of those things have happened to me. Not on one trip, thankfully.
Oh, God.
All of those things have happened to me, and I still love to travel. I still take those risks and whatever else because it's worth it. It's worth it for that feeling of getting to somewhere and just going, do you know what? Despite all of the crap that was put in my way, despite all of those barriers, I have got here and I have done it on my own or with support or whatever. And that is just it's so freeing. Like, it's so good for your mental health to just push that comfort zone and feel it. So, yes, it's difficult. Yes, it's risky, but it's worth it. Definitely.
That's really nice to hear, sort of such a positive outlook, because I think it is really scary for a lot of people, particularly if you've got a disability, because you do already feel quite vulnerable, I think.
I mean, sometimes it's scary for me going out and about in this country for days out of places that I've never been to before, because
sometimes it's difficult for me, getting out of the house with my dog. Like my guide dog's wonderful, but sometimes if I know it's going to be crowded in the town centre, I don't want to go because I know I'm going to get anxious. It's going to be difficult, and it's just, if you're scared to go out in your local town, the idea of going abroad on your own as well when you've got support needs, I don't think I could do it. But I think my husband would be pretty upset if I start going on holiday without him now as well. So.
Yeah, definitely. Alice, have you got another question?
So one of the things that we sort of picked up on some of the stuff that you've been saying in the form that you talked about was, you talked about how, and it's interesting, because you've just kind of really pushed there to say, don't be anxious and kind of say yes to the things that you're scared of. But you talked before about how disabled people can quite often find it hard to say no, and how it's sort of really important to kind of live do things your way and be true to yourself. And I just wanted to sort of talk to you a little bit about that, where that comes from, and sort of how that has kind of come about for you.
I think it's about finding out and working out what success looks like for you as an individual, what a successful life looks like for you. And I think that not saying yes to too much, or learning how to say no, but also sometimes saying yes to something that is outside of your comfort zone. I think that those two things can coexist. I don't
finding
think
the happy balance, isn't it?
I don't think that it's a case of one or the other. I do think it's balance. I think, I'm learning at the age that I'm at, and with the work, I do a lot of work on my mental health, and the key cornerstone of all of that for me is balance. But, to answer your question in terms of where has that come from, it's actually come from me intensively spending a lot of time in therapy, spending a lot of time speaking to counsellors. My default response to stress or to difficult situations, to things that make me feel uncomfortable, has always been to work. To distract myself, to work or to write or to be posted on social media, to constant hustle has always been my default coping mechanism, actually. And, in the last couple of years, that's really become a problem. It has resulted in burnout. It has meant that I haven't necessarily addressed some of the more difficult things that have happened in my life. And, these things only stay buried for so long. And I think, we exist in a culture now with social media and with, influencers and bloggers and all of that sort of thing, where we're all expected to be proving our worth, to be constantly, to be constantly on the go, to be productive, to be providing a service to society, to be contributing. And that's definitely something that I've fallen victim to in the past. I think, this year especially, because things have changed quite quickly, sometimes from one day to the next. Even still now, we don't really know what's going to happen next week. And that I find myself with a lot of free time. Find myself with trying to fill that free time, trying to hustle, trying to write, trying to improve my blog, trying to say, oh well, what do I do? How am I going to be a travel blogger if I can't travel? What do I do with that? And I'm just in a place now where I feel that I can say no, where I feel that when people approach me to do a project or to work with them or whatever, I can sit there and go, what's my motivation for doing it? If I were to say yes, what would I be motivated by? Would it be because I love the sound of the project and I really want to get involved? For example, this podcast. Would my motivation be purely financial? And that is a valid motivation, but if that is the case, then do I actually need it? Or am I just doing this simply to be seen and to be wanted and to seek approval from other people? And I think, it's not when life is busy, when we're making tens of these decisions every hour, it's really difficult to examine the motivation behind the decision that you've made. But one of the benefits for me of things slowing down have been that I've been able to sit back and go, what's this about? Where is this coming from? And I think I had, for most of my life, been a person who sought out the approval of other people. A people pleaser, most definitely. Probably a perfectionist. Definitely an overworker. And all of those things I am now continually working on to try and achieve that balance, because it's kind of, you don't want that perfectionism to tip over into, well, I have to say no to everything now because I've said that I'm not going to seek approval, or I have to make sure that I only get that from within, and I don't post on social media, and I don't get those likes. It's balance, and it's many grey areas, and I think it's about sitting there and saying, you know what, I am imperfect, I'm a human being, and that's all right.
And I think that one of the things that's really interesting that you mentioned quite early on in that is that this is a universal issue. This isn't just an issue for people with disabilities. This is, that need to get approval, that reassurance of, being seen by the outside world is something that I think people are increasingly experiencing. And the idea that as a disabled person you already have kind of physical barriers in a lot of ways, this is one more thing for people to deal with. But I like that it's almost, it's become a bit of a universal unifier for our generation. And I'm just grateful that I'm not 13 and all of this social media stuff is happening.
Me too. I think it is a universal experience, but I think, I do think that disabled people are kind of further conditioned to feel this way, to feel like we need to seek the approval of other people.
I definitely think that disabled people have that added pressure to prove themselves because they are often in rooms with, able-bodied people who, they're expected to do. When I was saying this to you the other day, Alice, when I was at college and I was in a mainstream setting for the first time, and I had to get work done, production files and stuff, because I was a media student. I used to have to get production files. Well, I can't be. I had to participate in the production, but I can't use a camera because when a camera's set to the right height, it's too high for me, and I can't do lighting, I can't do sound because I'm too short, and all this business. So what I did do was I created the biggest production files known to man that was so heavy, and everybody who was in class used to think I was a SWAT because, you know, I just loved doing paperwork. I was always seen as a bit of a nerd, really. And it wasn't that. It was because I was proving myself that I was worthy enough to be on the course. Do you know what I mean? It's that trying to work hard. And, you know, everybody was really worried about burnout and stuff. And it's only now, really, now that I'm in a job that I absolutely adore and love to pieces, that I'm starting to calm down and go, do you know what? Just take time. I mean, how many conversations have we had, Carrie Ann, where you've gone, Lucy, it's all right. If it takes you 2 days, 2 weeks, calm down. It's fine. We can do this. It's fine. You don't have to do it within 45 minutes.
Absolutely.
Of me sending you an email and go, I've done it. I've done it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do. I think, you know, it is definitely a universal experience, and social media and the pressures that brings can only add to that.
Yeah.
And that is a huge shame. But I do think that we are conditioned as disabled people to want to appear, to want to fit in, to, you know, like I said earlier, I went to mainstream school throughout my childhood, and, you know, the majority of my non-disabled friends were absolutely wonderful. But arriving at a mainstream secondary school and suddenly being surrounded by hundreds of children who've never seen a disabled person their own age and who want to put you in this very specific box, that's a difficult thing. And that led to me essentially modifying my behaviour so that other people would like me. And that stuck, and that went on for a long, long, long time.
That's very similar to my experience. I went to a mainstream school, but because of the nature of my disability, you know, I pass for not disabled very easily. And so in the same way, I had to have those moments where, you know, I would suddenly find that I had a need, an accessibility need, and that started to make me sort of appear different to my peers. And I did really do that, you know, changed my behavior, changed the way that more than anything, changed the way that I felt about myself and dealt with my accessibility needs and my feelings about my disability. I really internalized those as going, well, this is because I'm different. This is my fault because I'm different. Whereas, you know, if there had been that bridge already built to provide me the, you know, access to the things that I need, and there had been that acceptance, I think, amongst my peers who didn't have disabilities, I would have turned into a different person. I'm not saying I dislike the person I am. In fact, I'm very proud of myself and what I've done. And actually, a lot of that is because, like you, Carrie Ann, I've had to have a lot of therapy to get to this point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and I think similar. I think I passionately believe that there should be a dedicated mental health support for, you know, disabled children who are coming of age, who are
absolutely.
Because don't get me wrong, that is a horrible time for everybody. I don't know. I've never met anyone who enjoyed their early teenage years and who really.
I really enjoyed being a 13-year-old.
No, horrible.
Horrible.
But, no, we have so many extra things to contend with at that time, you know, trying to find out who you are in the context of when everybody else expects you to be something else.
And also, Carrie Ann, as well, you know, as a disabled child, when you are going through the system as a disabled child, there is so much support. You can't move for people clambering to get at you. And then you get to teenage age, and then all of a sudden, just ever so slowly, it starts to back away a bit of this to go, oh no, we don't deal with that anymore.
Yeah.
Your experience is very different to my experience, Lucy. They were like, I was just basically dropped in a mainstream school, and they went, what do you mean you can't see? Why don't you go over there and do this instead? And I was like, oh, all right.
They used to like say to you, go and play netball. We'll shout your name as we throw a ball at your face.
My experience was similar to Lucy in that I had a lot of support for my medical condition right up until the age of 16, but I don't remember at any point. I mean, this was the 90s, so we just didn't talk about mental health. That wasn't a thing that you spoke about. And, I might have, had I had the correct mental health support at that point in my life, I feel like perhaps my 20s might have been a bit of a happier time, and I might not have been quite so plagued with anxiety and things. That said, and I have done a lot of therapy, and it's not always easy, but I genuinely really enjoy that journey. Like I feel like I'm privileged to be able to understand that it's not something that I have to do because there's anything wrong with me. It's just something that's really beneficial to my life. And
I think self-awareness is amazing. If you can understand your own motivations and understand what your emotional needs are, even if you're not able to meet them for yourself, if you're able to kind of look at them and go, this is what I need, then you can surround yourself with the right people and get the right tools to be able to meet those needs somehow. And I think if we were all doing that across the world, it would be a much happier place.
Completely. My friend and I have this thing where we always say, I just think everyone should be in therapy. Absolutely everybody should have at least one or two counselling sessions where they just go, do you know what, this is what it's about. Because being able to learn more about who you are and what makes you work, and as Alice said, your own kind of motivations and self-awareness is just such a powerful thing, and it's something that I do really think is a privilege.
But there's such a stigma around it. I think everybody still thinks it's going to be, you're going to be going to see somebody like Sigmund Freud, you're going to be lying on a couch and they're going to tell you that secretly you wanted to do stuff to your mum, and it's not like that at all. And I think that's one of the barriers to kind of mental health that really needs to get broken down, is that recognition that actually counseling and therapy, it's not easy, like you said, but it's not what people think it's going to be. It's not about being stripped down to the bone. It's about just looking at yourself in a slightly different way and being able to take a step back sometimes.
And I think as well, some disabled people, I know I'm guilty of this, can occasionally put a brave face on things. Like keep smiling, everything's fine, it's all right, everything's fine. I mean, a few years ago, I went through a really bad time before I started work with Accessible. I went through a horrendous situation with my old job, and it just completely floored me, and it knocked my confidence so much. And I can remember going to I was having all sorts, like I got kidney stone problems, and everything was just, I wasn't in a very good place. And I can remember going to the GP and sitting with the GP and him saying, "Are you all right?" And I just burst into tears. And whilst I was crying, I was thinking, "Oh no, like stop crying. And he said, "Lucy, you have an awful lot on your plate that a lot of people don't even give a second thought to. Just if you need to just let it out. You don't have to keep this smiley face on all the time, because you think people might think you're this miserable disabled person who's sad with their lot. You're not sad with your lot. You just got a lot to deal with.
You're just human. Actually, you're
exactly.
And I think this goes back to what I was saying about, the power of saying no. And that there is this quote that is, no is a complete sentence. If somebody asks you to do something and you don't want to do it, you don't actually have to justify why you don't want to do it. You can just say no. And I think the authenticity in that really speaks to what you've just said, Lucy, because it's about, are we putting a brave face on because we want to do what other people expect of us, or because we want to seek the approval of other people because that makes us feel good? Whereas actually, if we were just authentic, if we were just actually honest about how we felt, and we were able to have an honest and open conversation, we'd come away feeling so much better. We might not make that person feel better, but that's not our job.
No.
Well, and I think there's definitely still in society that sort of expectation that people with disabilities are miserable and bitter and sad about their lot in life.
I think, do you know, Alice, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think a lot of people who have, they feel they can't show a weakness because, you know, if we're sad and we're sad for a bit about something that's really, you know, hurtful and quite painful to go through, if we're sad on to the outside world, everybody's going to think, well, I was right anyway, wasn't I? Because those disabled people, they're sad because they're disabled. And it's not necessarily because I can't walk that I'm sad. It's because, you know, I'm in pain, or I'm exhausted because I've had a night awake because I can't sleep. It's nothing to do with the fact I can't walk. And yes, that can feel quite, you know, I get days sometimes where I get quite frustrated with myself, but that's not sadness. I'm just frustrated because I think, you know, just give me a break. I'm not sad. I just need a bit of a rest sometimes. Do you know what I mean? And be nice to myself.
Yeah. And so many of the things that can cause us to be sad about being disabled are things like, well, I'm sad because I can't get into the same place as all my friends because it's not accessible. The things that make me sad are when I go into shops and I can't find what I'm looking for because they've moved things and the labels are all too small for me to read, and I'm disorganized, so I forgot my pocket reader and things like that. That's what makes me sad. That's what makes me frustrated. Yes, you could say that's me being sad because of my visual impairment, but actually that's me being sad because there are things in the world that I can't access because of my visual impairment.
Yeah.
And I think those are two very different things.
Yeah. And I think that's a very powerful distinction. And I think, you know, again, just going back to that human element, if, you know, we experience the full range of emotions just like any other person in the world would do. So we're allowed to be sad, we're allowed to be pissed off, we're allowed to be bitter, we're allowed to be whatever, you know. We're also really happy sometimes. Because believe it or not, I can use a wheelchair as my main mode of transport and also experience happiness.
We were talking about this earlier, weren't we, Alice? About how, you know, what makes non-disabled people so scared of disabled people. I mean, if you look at it, you know, sometimes you do think to yourself, we must be as contagious as coronavirus because they like, oh no, I don't know what to do. What do I do? What do I do? And we, you know, is it because they think we're going to talk about disability issues all the time? Because that is way down on our list of priorities to talk about. Like, I want to talk to you about what's your favourite gin and all that kind of stuff before you get to why don't my legs work?
It feels a little bit like, and this is, I'm sure, going to offend some people, but you know, sometimes, I don't know if this is how I get talked to by strangers a lot. There's something about having a guide dog that makes people think, I'm going to talk to this person. And I will start up a perfectly harmless chat with, you know, someone will be asking me about dog and I'm like, this is all fine. And then they'll be like, have you got some time to talk about Jesus? And I'm like, no, actually, I haven't got any time to talk about Jesus. and that's where
why am I laughing? Because that has happened to me.
That's what I think people are worried we're going to go up to. Have you got some time to talk about disability?
Yeah, maybe.
Firstly, I don't know a disabled person who that hasn't happened to. I genuinely don't know a disabled person without a story of prayer being offered.
Yes.
I have two favourites that stick in my mind. My two favourite stories of having prayer forced upon me. One of which happened in the ready meal aisle of Marks and Spencer at London Euston Station. And it's always when I'm having a really good day. I'd been at meetings, I'm wearing a dress I'd really liked, I had my hair done. I'm like, I'm just going to grab some dinner, grab some gin in a tin for the train. You know, it's all good. And this guy, he's kind of just looking at me. And I'm like, has he read my blog? Does he recognise?
Yeah, well, this is his thing, isn't it?
Is he going to tap me up? Like, my hair does look good today. Hi, what? And he said, excuse me, madam. Yeah. God has told me, no, it was, I'm a Christian man. So the alarm bell started. God has told me that he would like me to pray for you.
Personal message service there, isn't he, really? That's quite impressive.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you tell God that I could really do with a few extra quid at the moment? And if he's taking messages,
can he do some promotion for our podcast, please?
Yeah. And also, can he ask my nan where she left her diamond earrings because I wanted some?
Yeah.
My first thought was like, sorry, mate, but you're clearly the one who's hearing voices. So maybe in this miraculous healing queue, you want to like skip ahead? Because it sounds like you need a bit more help than I do, actually. And because this was London, like, because whenever this happens, I'm on my own, right? Yeah. So I'm like, because this was London, I'm looking around me going, like, somebody must have heard that. Come on. Come on. Nothing at all. And you know, I don't want to offend anybody. If religion is in your life and it is helpful to you and it gives you comfort, then that is a wonderful thing. But please do not force that onto other people, and do not assume that just because somebody has an impairment which is visible to you, that they want to get rid of that impairment.
No.
Absolutely.
Those are always the point. I don't want to be cured. Thank you very much.
No.
That's fundamentally what that message is, isn't it? It's, I'm going to pray for you because you're broken, and God, I want God to fix you.
Yeah. And then the second one, and these are both quite on brand because they were like travel settings. So the first one was in a train station, Marks and Spencer. The second one, I go swimming to a local hotel leisure club. I love to swim. And I always go in the sauna afterwards as a bit of a wind down. Now, I think people who talk to strangers in the sauna are weird.
Yes. No. Nobody talk to me. Don't look at me. Right. Leave me alone.
I don't want my husband to talk to me when I'm naked. Never mind random strangers.
Like, even taking disability out of the equation, just don't do that. It's weird. And like, I'm always like lying there on the bench, like with my eyes shut. I'm giving off every possible vibe of do not talk to me that I can. And this chap still goes, can I ask you a question which I hope won't offend you?
Which you already know is going to offend you.
Here we go. And I thought, well, you know, maybe he just wants to know a bit more about how I managed to swim or something. And I genuinely don't mind that, apart from the fact that we're in a sauna and this is inappropriate. Has anyone ever offered to pray for you?
Oh, man.
And I was just really honest, and I said, look, religion is not something that is in my life, and I don't want to be prayed for. Thank you. No. I'm very happy as I am. And he said, oh well, yeah, I've seen you here doing your swimming. You obviously cope very well. And I thought, let's just leave this conversation here. We're just going to go round in circles.
I was once, when I was a kid, approached by a lady with grey hair who told me God had forgiven me, everything was going to be all right, and she gave me a pack of Maltesers.
I mean, I could get on board if they all handed out treats.
Yeah, I was going to say, if people are going to start coming up to me in the street and be like, it's really sad that you're blind, here, have some chocolate.
Here, have some fruit pastels.
So what had you done to be forgiven for?
Well, exactly. I don't know. I do not know. Like, I don't know. Maybe it was a bad fashion choice in the 90s. I don't know. But and then when quite recently, my mom she used to go and have a haircut in a local town near us. So she would go and have a haircut, and I would sort of wander around the shops waiting for her, and get back in the car and come home again. So whilst I was wandering around in the shops, I was coming out of Marks and Spencer's and I got a bag of stuff, and I was pushing myself. Now, it looked, to the onlooker, it may have looked like I was struggling, but I wasn't. I was managing. I was fine. I was all right. And I got this bag, and this bloke comes up to me, and he still stands in front of me, and he said, "Let me help you." And I said, "No, it's fine. I've got. I know it looks like I'm struggling, but I'm absolutely fine." And he went, "No, let me help you." And before we could finish what he was saying, next thing I knew, his hands were on my thighs.
Oh.
And I'm like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm going to pray for you." I was like,
oh my goodness.
"Can you get your hands off me, please?" And he went, "No, I'm going to pray for you." I said, "Get your fucking hands off me." To which he sort of like let go because he realised I wasn't pissing about. He let go and ran off. And then as I was walking out of the shopping centre, because I thought, I don't want him following me, I'm going to like leave. And as I was walking out of the shopping centre, an older man and a woman, this would have gone over my head if it had been any normal circumstance, but I'd just had, Handy McHanderson put his hands on my legs.
Handy McHanderson.
Yes, exactly. And this older man said to his wife, within earshot of me, "Oh, look at that. Don't you think somebody should have put her out of her misery?" And I thought, just keep walking. And I thought, do you know what? No, I'm not going to keep walking. So I went back. I don't know what possessed me, but I went back. And I went, "Excuse me, sir. I don't know if you realise, but I just heard every word you just said about me to your wife. And I don't know what part of me looks like I've given up, but I can assure you I haven't." I then called him the worst swear word there is, twice. And I was like, "Oh, stop it. Oh, stop it." Because I was like, "Where's that come from?" And then I turned to his wife and I said, "I do not know what you have done in your life to end up with a man who is that vile and that disgusting." And she looked mortified. But this man had just got a smirk on his face. And I just walked away from him. But I was just like, oh. I went back into Marks and Spencer's because I felt more safe in Marks and Spencer's than I did outside of the shop. I went and sat and cried by the Percy Pigs waiting for my mum because I was like, "Mum." She's like, "What?" I was like, "There's been some horrible men." She's like, "What do you mean horrible men?" I was like, "Well, one man put his hands on me and one man said that they should have put me out of my misery." But it doesn't happen very often these days. But when it does, I think it's more shocking now these days when it happens because you're like, I can't believe. I mean, there's people out there, don't you, still to this day.
So that story is a little bit off topic, but that story reminds me very much of something a friend of mine was telling me recently. A friend of mine, her best friend has been with her other half for a little while, and he's sort of in the process of moving in a bit. Before he made that sort of big final leap to move in, my friend's friend decided she's going to get herself a dog. It's lockdown. She's sad. All of this. She wants to get herself a dog. So she goes off and she goes and she finds this litter of puppies, and she falls in love with this one dog who's only got 3 feet. Okay. And she adores him and she loves him, and she brings him home to show her bloke, and her bloke goes, "We can't have that dog. I'm not going out with a dog like that. Look at him." Because he's only got 3 feet. And she was like, "Legitimately, I've known this dog for 5 minutes. I will pick this dog over you. Sort yourself out."
Yeah,
but
no. That's a red flag.
Oh yeah, definitely. But it's just proof that it's that difference. He wouldn't even go out with a dog with 3 legs. Like, what if that had been there? What if they'd had a child who, like Lucy, who was born early and so has CP? Like, that's something you can have absolutely no control over. What's he going to do? Go, "Oh, I'm not going to take that child to the park."
Can we have another one, please?
Yeah.
Can we try again? Is there any way we can put her back in?
You know what I think about those couple of stories, which is what I often think about Twitter these days, is that not everybody has to have an opinion on everything. You know what? Sometimes, and I catch myself with this, right? Because I'll see whatever's kicking off on disability Twitter this week, because there's always something, isn't there?
Yeah,
And
always.
I'll go, oh, that's what I think about this, and I'll start typing out an angry tweet, and then I'll go, just stop, because all you're doing is adding to the noise. Like you're not actually doing anything that's going to benefit anyone else. For a start, you are talking in an echo chamber, because that's what social media is. People follow people like them. But I think, that I think the same about those two men, well, three men that we've just spoken about. Sometimes your opinions just aren't needed. Just
No.
yourself.
Yeah, I know.
It's one of the there are occasions where I'm like, having a disability comes in handy, and I only use Twitter on my phone, and Twitter on my phone, like, to be able to see it, I have to zoom in and magnify, and I can't magnify my keyboard and my
The screen
at the same time.
Yeah.
So I can either see what I have said or see what I am typing. And so quite often I will start typing a message and go, oh, I cannot be arsed with this.
Yeah.
So it's a really good way of making me go, can I really be bothered to respond to this message or to this tweet or whatever? Is it worth the spoons, basically? And you know what? It's not most of the time.
I know exactly what you mean, and I think that's kind of where I'm coming from with it, but just from a point of view of, you know what, you just don't have to be this reactive all the time.
No.
It's really bad for your mental health. It's much nicer to just ignore it.
If somebody came to me like and asked my opinion on something, then I would tell you.
Yeah,
I think. Like,
I mean, it's a bit rich for us to sit here and say that when we're doing a podcast, which is basically us talking about our experiences and our opinions. But and I just find myself thinking, what good could you do if you put that energy somewhere else?
Yes, that exactly. I mean, I do think that the two things are different, because you've set this project up with the specific aim of sort of challenging other people's perceptions and shining a light on some of the stuff that we don't always talk about. I think the trend on social media, and it goes back to that approval seeking, that wanting to be seen, that we want lots of people to hit that little love heart button, and so that it means that often, particularly in disability circles, we're expected to be an expert on whatever's happening in the news around disability this week.
I think it does help if you have got a bit of a niche area that you want to talk about within disability, because if you just say all I want to do is talk about disability online, then you are like fighting snakes, because it just one pops up after another. Whereas if we were, don't we, with Carrie Ann, with people who are passionate about certain specific issues, and I think that helps when you are being a campaigner, because you are focused on your passion is on one particular area of expertise. So I think that helps. But if you are an average disabled person, I think having somebody say, oh, well, you must be an expert because, it's that thing, is it? It's a bit like that thing where somebody sees you in a wheelchair and goes, my aunt's sister's brother-in-law's dog is
broke a toe once.
Yeah. Do you know them? Like, no.
No, believe it or not, we don't all know each other. No, I agree with you, and I think the thing particularly about online activism is that when you are a disabled person who also campaigns around disability issues, it's really difficult to draw that line between being Carrie Ann the online activist and just Carrie Ann the person who wants to have a day off. And so that leaves you never having a day off, actually. And it goes back to what I said earlier. I question sometimes how effective online activism can really be, when often we are speaking in an echo chamber. We are all sharing the same messages to people who agree with them. 95% of my followers will be other disabled people. The other 5% will be my family and friends. I'm very rarely reaching people outside of my own sphere, and that doesn't mean that what I do isn't worthwhile. I'm still helping people, I'm still putting information out that people find helpful, but I'm not necessarily changing attitudes or changing the world in such a big way. And I think sometimes you have to prioritize what you need as an individual over what the disabled community needs.
And I think, one of the things that it is worth kind of reiterating here is that and it's something that me and Lucy were talking about earlier, is that we don't have the expertise across the board. We all have our own individual experiences. So, if you're passionate and you are sharing things on Twitter and you are, campaigning online, you are going to reach some people who don't know, and some people who have different experiences, and there's no such thing as being too educated about these things.
No.
But I do absolutely agree that it is the majority of the people who are concerned about equal opportunities are not the people that should be being concerned about equal opportunities.
Yeah. I agree. I definitely don't want to dissuade anybody from campaigning, and I don't want to shame anyone for doing that. I think, if that's your bag and if you love it, then absolutely go for it. Without people to campaign and to spread the message and whatever, we would certainly not be as far down the equality road as we are. But I think my advice is just don't let it take over. Don't let it become you.
And I think as well, from my point of view, I think being online and being an approachable face on social media who is open about their disability and, will answer questions, I think that in itself is, there's a time and a place for it. I don't want you asking questions every day of the week, but when I say, like, has anybody got any questions they'd like to ask me, I think being able to be as open and as honest as you feel comfortable with is going some way to breaking down barriers. If you say, like, it's not the same for everybody, but this is my experience of, whatever. I mean, and sometimes when I ask that question on social media, the questions are often like, oh, what's your favourite clothes shops? They're nothing to do with my disability, but it's I think being that sort of friendly face, because I think, again, non-disabled people can often be a bit put off because they don't want to offend us. They think we're going to cry every 5 minutes as soon as anybody mentions the fact that we're in a wheelchair or we've got a disability, that they think we're going to break down and be about as strong as a wet piece of paper, when actually that's not the case, is it? We are used to these stupid questions. However stupid they may sound, we are used to them.
I think there is a distinction there for me, though. So, my wheelchair looks quite different to other wheelchairs because I use a power pack that's quite rare and stuff like that. So people are quite often checking it and they're like, oh, that's cool, isn't it? Yeah. And you know what? If people want to ask me questions because my wheelchair looks cool, I'm really happy with that. It cost me £10,000. I want to talk about it. Do you know what I mean?
Jesus Christ. That's how I feel about my wedding. It cost me £10,000. You're fucking talking about it for the next 10 years.
Absolutely. Come and ask me about the cool wheelchair because it's cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But do not come at me, you complete stranger, with what's wrong with you then, love.
Yeah. Oh. What happened to you?
Just because, sometimes it's entertaining because, we can have a little fun with it. But I don't want any disabled person to feel pressure to share details of their diagnosis or their disability with complete strangers just because a complete stranger is curious. So my husband is non-disabled and works in a very male-orientated environment full of other non-disabled people, and they had been a little bit curious about me, shall we say? And you know, it was all the questions of like when they asked the question without asking the question, the what your wife's at the what.
Yes, so your wife, yeah.
The wheels,
Yeah.
And he'd said, "Oh no, it's nothing like that. I'm just very well endowed." He actually put it like that. I probably made it sound a bit more polite than the words he used.
That's amazing.
That's
brilliant.
That is brilliant.
Yeah, so I think there is a distinction between, you know, absolutely ask me a question about my awesome wheelchair, or about, you know, are you managing all right in this building with access or whatever, but don't expect me to divulge my medical records to a complete stranger
or your personal life.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, that is another one. My friends are very used to people sort of saying, so your friend, what happened to her, like, and you know, my best friend, bless him, he when we've gone to the pub, I say taken me out like he's doing me a favour, when we've gone to the pub, it's probably because I've kicked off because he's not taken me anywhere for a while, but when we've gone to the pub, we have had people behind the bar go, should she be drinking in her condition? And he's like, she's not pregnant. It's her legs that don't work. It's not. There's nothing else like. And he goes, have you tried taking a drink off her? She bites if you don't. Which is true. But but my friends get far more wound up about things happening to me than I do. Like he will notice people staring more than I do. I know that people stare, but I don't tend to notice it anymore.
Because we have to pick our battles. Because you know, every disabled person gets to a point in their life where they realise that if they got angry every time something stupid like this happened, spend our whole lives being angry.
And that just perpetuates that stereotype that we're angry and bitter.
Person. I definitely had to educate my husband when I first met him of like, you know, we can't campaign every time an automatic door isn't working.
It's a ramp like off angle a bit. Like, it's people. Yeah, my friends will go, can you see how he's staring at you? And I'm like, yeah. But it's not. Just leave it. It's fine. And he's like, no, but he's proper good. I'm like, yeah, just leave it. Just leave it. I want to go to the pub. Just leave it. It's like,
No, my biggest thing that I face on a almost daily basis when I go out with my guide dog is people asking if I'm training her, because she's quite a young looking dog, and it's people saying, oh, are you training her? And I go, no, she's my guide dog. And they'll quite often, there's this kind of combination of, oh, you look young and you don't look blind. And I'm really worried about the day that people stop asking me whether I'm training her, because it makes me feel like it's everybody going, oh, you look really old. Because if I look young, I must be doing it for a job. I can't be blind and young.
No, of course not. It is really funny when that happens, isn't it? That reminds me of a time when I was on a train. I used to have to go down to the office once a month, and it was like Friday, train home, rush hour, always full of drunk people, and I would usually just be like sitting working, because I'm like, well, like I'm going to have a gin, let's be honest, but also I've got a 3-hour train journey and a load of work to catch up on. And there was this guy who was just pissed and being a nuisance. He wasn't being particularly offensive, but he was just like, oh, talk to us then, love, you know, do you want a beer? Do you want? And I'm like, no, I'm working. Like, carry on with yourself, leave me be. And I when I get on the train, depending on the direction that I'm travelling in, I will quite often transfer to the train seat, because I can't sit backwards. I can't face away from the direction of travel. It makes me travel sick.
And also, the disabled seating area is often near the toilet, which stinks. So
especially on a Friday night at a tray full of drums.
So I'm
Just what
contending
you
with
got.
all of this, and I've transferred out of the chair. I'm writing emails. I've got my gin. I'm quite happy with life. If only this guy would leave me alone. And then he starts touching the wheelchair,
Oh,
which is empty and on the other side of the table. And I'm like, I'm seeing red at this point. I'm like, you have no idea how much that thing cost. Do not touch it. And I started saying something of that effect to this man, and he went, "Oh, is it yours?" Yeah. And it was like the penny drop. Like he instantly stopped being rude to me and started.
Did he?
Yeah. He like stopped trying to goad me or whatever, because clearly it's all right to intimidate a young woman on her own on the train unless she's disabled. And then just it was like the penny, like he couldn't fathom that I was like sat there, you know, in a suit, writing some emails, looking professional, commuting home on a Friday, and also disabled. The two things just, and he basically just walked away.
Yeah, it definitely can come in useful sometimes, that's for sure.
It's that disability card again.
Yeah, we've got to work it to our advantage where we can, haven't we?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think we've talked about a lot of different things here, and you know, we did in the form that we sent you out, Carrie Ann, we sort of said, is there any particular messages or anything that you'd like to really get out there? And I think you've covered a lot of it, but was there anything that you really wanted to, you know, what would be your soapbox? What hill do you want to die on? Is there anything you really want to say here?
I guess, like, I'm thinking about the context of the podcast and the kind of the labels and all of that sort of thing, and I guess, you know, the labels that society places on us. And I think in everything that we've spoken about today and all of the experiences that we've got across, it is that there isn't black and white, that we don't fit into any box, actually, because we're all very different people. But just because I'm a disabled person doesn't mean I can't also be this type of person or that type of person. Doesn't mean I don't want to work on my mental health. Sometimes it means I'm sad, sometimes it means I'm happy. Often my emotions have absolutely nothing to do with my disability. And, you know, life is challenging and stressful, and the point on that challenging and stressful list that my disability is right down the bottom rung. I've got many more things to worry about than the fact that I use a wheelchair. So I think, you know, when we think about labels, and we think about the labels that other people impress on us, is that we shouldn't be thinking in a one-dimensional context. We shouldn't be thinking about giving any one label, as Lucy as a wheelchair user, or, you know, Alice as a guide dog owner, or Carrie Ann as a wheelchair user, because we're just people. We're just human, and that means that we're many, many, many different things, including the fact that we just need a bit of an equipment or an animal to help us out every so often.
Yeah.
You know, and you only have to look at our WhatsApp messages on a Friday afternoon that says, "What gin are we drinking this weekend?" to realise that we just, you know, I think a lot of people think that if we are disabled people, we must only ever talk about disability issues, and that is not the case at all, is it really?
No.
My favourite gin is this lemon sherbet gin that you can get that's got glitter in it.
Amazing.
It's amazing. Looks like you're drinking a magic potion.
I like cherry bakewell gin because you can actually taste the pastry.
Ooh.
I'm a big
Did you also have one that had like a biscuit flavour? Am I remembering rightly?
Yes, but I can't remember what it was called because it's been and gone. But we do drink a lot of gin. Well, I drink a lot of gin.
I also. Well, the fact that I send you a photo of a different bottle every Friday.
Yeah.
Probably quite an indication.
Do you know what I say to my mum? Oh, could you go get me this gin?
Yeah. Have you guys tried there's a Aldi do an elementals range or something, so it's like air, fire, water, and is it earth? It's something else. They're like different themed. I think they sound really cool.
Yeah, we need to on that.
That is the one thing we are planning when life gets back to normal. is the fact that we are going to go on a cocktail spree.
Oh, we carry on.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
Sounds like a good plan.
our team meetings nearly always involve cocktails because
Best line manager in the world.
I need to change jobs.
You have to have a meeting, you might as well have a cocktail to wash it down with.
Yeah.
Yes, we are very fortunate to be able to do that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say. I guess just like where people can find me and my blog.
Yes, I was going to ask you for all of your socials and everything, so go ahead.
So my blog is carrieannlightley.com. Couple of things that I've spoken about on there, so you can sign up to my regular newsletter, which will give you the download of my travel planner, and then on pretty much all of my social media, I'm on at Carrie Ann Lightley blog. I think Twitter is at Carrie A Lightley. I mean, you know, just Google Carrie Ann travel and you'll find me all over the place.
That's Anne without an E, isn't it?
Yes. Apparently the top search term for my website is Carrie Ann blogger. So there you go.
There we go.
That's how you can see me.
Cheers, Carrie Ann. Thank you very much.
That's right. No worries.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for listening to the lABLEd podcast. If you like the show, please rate, review and subscribe. You can follow us on social media at lABLEd podcast.
Our thanks go to our editor Adam Hall, our music composer Maisie Crunden, and our graphic designer Sarah Coley.
We'll see you next time.